Hey, thanks for joining me today on Window Shot, where we talk to industry professionals about all aspects of the film industry, lessons that they've learned, exciting times they've had, and most importantly, what exactly they do. With that being said, let's jump into today's interview. Hello, Hala. Thank you very much for joining us today. Tell us exactly where can we find you in the credits?
Hi, my name is Hala Honey. I'm a grip, sometimes best grip, sometimes key grip. Yeah, thanks so much, Tony, for having me.
And so, why did you choose gripping of all the other departments in the industry?
I'm very hands-on, and I like to do things physically, and all the rigging and all the variety of things you can do in your career as a grip really interested me, so that's why I chose gripping.
I gotta say, that's also one of the reasons I love gripping as well. There's just so many cool toys to play with and build and contraption. It's kind of like Lego as an adult.
It's totally like Lego.
Now, you have a really interesting story from how you even got into gripping in the first place. In fact, I would say it's probably one of the more unique ways that I've heard anybody get into gripping. Can you share a little bit about how you got into the grip department, from where you kind of first started to kind of where you are now?
Sure. So before I started gripping, I was working in the modeling industry. It was more of like a means to an end kind of career path. I was doing a bit of photography, event photography before, some video editing. I got into modeling. My cousin got scouted, and then he recruited me. It's kind of like a Ponzi scheme. But at first I said no, but then they offered me my first job, and I saw the rate, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll do it.
There you go.
And then I ended up modeling in Asia for 3 years, and the whole time I was there, I was thinking, okay, this is not a long-term career path. Like, I need to think of what I want to do with my life, and being surrounded in entertainment with modeling, like photography and commercials, I started to see a little bit of what they were doing behind the scenes, and I thought it was really cool because it's kind of like photography but on steroids. Like, you just have lighting, camera, talent, BG, background actors.
So even as you were modeling, you were kind of noticing all the behind the scenes stuff that went into your modeling aspect, and you were curious about that.
Yeah. And that's also how I met a lot of director photographers, directors, other people in film. And so I reached out to one friend who was a DP, and I said, I want to be on a film set. I don't know what I want to do, but can I volunteer and figure it out? And he said, sure, come on this music video I'm shooting next weekend.
And so what did he have you do on that first job?
So, I mean, being a DP or a cinematographer, you're so busy, you don't really have time to babysit someone into their first time on set on the production side. So he just said, here, find a department. I was like, okay, I don't even know what department.
Thrown to the wolves.
Yeah, and I knew one girl who worked in the art department, and she was like, hey, do you want to try out art? And I was like, oh, okay, I never thought about it. I'm not like a painter or anything. And she's like, oh, no worries. Okay, first task, we're gonna have you take this PlayStation controller, and you're gonna bedazzle it. You're gonna glue these little crystals on them and make it look very girly. And I was like, I'm like, this doesn't seem fun to me. Like, I don't see myself doing this. And don't get me wrong, art department, they have such a crazy job, and they're very underappreciated sometimes.
Couldn't agree more.
But for me, it's just so subjective. I just didn't see myself doing it. And then I eventually met my friend's key grip, and he was doing all these crazy rigs. We were doing a short film on a bridge in Elora, and it was super windy, and it was a doorway dolly, but he put, I think it was a panther jib on it, and it's on this bridge, super windy. He's putting weights on it, and I was just like a PA, like a production assistant, but I ended up becoming a swing on that short film because I just asked him so many questions. I'm like, oh, why are you doing this? How are you triangulating this to make it rigid and not move, and the wind speeds? And he was like, oh, do you want to be a grip? And I was like, is that what you do? I don't know. I don't. And he was like, yes, I'll take you under my wing and I'll show you the ropes.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And so the questions that you were asking, was he or other people annoyed by that? Or was it like really welcomed for you, or almost refreshing to be like, yeah, like you want to know something and they wanted to share their knowledge?
I think it was really refreshing because it was such a small crew. That's one of the hardest things to learn on a film set is set etiquette, and knowing when there's time to ask questions, when how to respond to calls on the walkie, things like that. But I was learning as I was there, as I was going, and it was such a small film crew that he was really understaffed, undercrewed, and he appreciated the questions I was asking.
Nice,
I think.
nice.
Yeah.
So then what were some of the biggest hurdles that you kind of felt you had to overcome going from modeling to being thrown to the wolves a little bit to now more full-time grip? Like what were some of those big challenges along the way that you found?
I think the hardest thing was how to stay warm outside when you're shooting like 12-hour days, overnights. Because it never occurred to me that, if you're outside for more than 2 hours, and you're just standing there sometimes when they're rolling and there's sound, you can't make noise, you can't, there's not really any movement happening, so your body temperature drops. And my feet got so cold, and I'm like, oh, how do you guys do this? And the key grip was like, you're gonna need to invest in some waterproof, super warm thermals first before you buy any tools. And I was like, okay, done, noted.
It's one of those things we don't think about
No.
until, or even like we're on set and they turn on a rain machine, right?
Yeah.
Or they turn on a wind machine, or you're using rain in the snow time. Like it's such an important thing to be able to have. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you are just miserable all day.
Yeah, it's not something that you think about until you're doing the job, really. So.
Now you've recently just become a member in the union. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
What were some of the biggest differences you saw when you went from the independent commercial land to the first union that you were a part of, which was a little smaller of a union, to the union that you're now going into?
I think the biggest difference was the toys. The gear. The gear.
You can call them toys.
Toys.
They are toys
yeah.
at the end of the day. We get to play with.
Even with the first union I joined, NABEP, it's a more local union compared to IATSE. It was still very shocking to me how much more gear there is to play with compared to indie commercials or indie short films, features. I don't think I'd never seen a Pee-wee before that. I don't remember what else was there. Yeah, I think when I first saw Pee-wee, that was like my biggest memory. I was like, whoa, what is this? This looks like like a war machine of some kind. And I think also there's a lot more politics involved. Depending on which role you end up in, but I went into besting right away when I went into the union, which is not normal, but I found myself dealing with a lot more negotiations with the production manager, trying to vouch for why we need more daily hires or more equipment rentals, more pre-calls, things like that. Whereas in the indie world, everything is just like, this is it, we don't have money and there's no negotiating, so
This is what you get.
This is what you get. And a lot of the time the gear is personal rentals from the DP, or the producers sometimes have their own things too.
So then what kind of advice would you have for people that are looking at becoming a grip in the union or applying for it, or skills or trades that they should try and hone in on?
I think the best piece of advice is to ask a lot of questions. If you already have access to being on set, if you're already a PA or someone who is familiar with the film industry, then I think that going into the gripping department, I think the best thing to do is ask a lot of questions at the right time.
Key point, at the right time.
At the right time, because if the key grip is in the middle of a setup and they're turning around and you try to jump in and ask a question, he's going to be pissed, or she is going to be pissed. So find a time where they look like they're not too busy, or just phrase it like, I want to ask you a few questions later if you have time, and most likely they'll be excited to answer your questions quickly, right?
So then what would you say would be the top 3 things somebody should go on out and buy if they want to be a grip that they should have on their belt?
Top 3 things: X-Acto knife, crescent wrench, and the black paper tape.
And everything else they can kind of get on set, or as they continue to.
As they continue. A lot of people have grip gloves as well. I don't personally like to use them.
Now, can you share with us a little bit about what it means for grips to shape the light? Like, we'll hear that in passing or in the media or anything like that. What does that mean, that grips shape the light?
It basically means to manipulate how the shadows turn up on camera. And you can do that with diffusions, or to soften the light, soften the shadows. You can use flags or floppies to control the direction of the light as well, to make sure there's no spill happening. You can bounce the light so it's softer and more spread. You can also control the intensity with nets, single nets, double nets. I mean, gaffers and electrics can also do that with their scrims, but
not to the same extent, though.
Not to the same extent.
What are some common mistakes that we don't need to give names, but what are some common mistakes that you've seen grips make over the years that are just either cringeworthy, or you're just like, oh my goodness, I can't believe you just did that? Or
people who still don't know lefty loosey, righty tighty really bothers me. I've seen. So I just joined. I became a member in September, but when I was a permit, I was seeing some like seasoned grips still doing lefty loosey, and I was looking.
Sorry, can you just break that down for those?
Okay, so righty tighty, lefty loosey is basically you want to put the weight. So there's a knuckle on a stand that you tighten to secure something in a C-stand, for example, and in the grip head, the knuckle always tightens clockwise. So when you put something in the knuckle, you want it to be on the right side of where the knuckle tightens, so that if the wind blows or if you didn't tighten it all the way, the action of it falling will continue to tighten. Whereas if you do lefty loosey, if it falls, it's not going to tighten in the direction of the knuckle being clockwise. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it's a pretty good description so far of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's lefty loosey, righty tighty.
Yeah, and so that's the most common mistake you see a lot of people make.
It's not the most common. Well, maybe it is, but it's the one that bothers me the most.
That's fair.
There's certain things that you learn as you get more experience on set, and they're more forgiving, I think. But lefty loosey, righty tighty, it's like, come on, that's like 101 gripping. You shouldn't be doing this after like years of working in the industry. I don't know.
I used to have a second that was notorious for walking over the stand cart and loosening all the knuckles on our team ahead of time. And so every time the gaffer would go on over, he'd pull the whole stand out, and the whole thing would just expand, and he would just go off and flip out at us and stuff like that.
Wait, so was he doing that on purpose?
Oh, he's doing it on purpose, just to mess with us.
I think I remember you telling me this story actually when we first worked together.
It was just so annoying. It was just like, oh my word.
Or the grips would like over wrench all the knuckles so you couldn't open it with your hand.
That wasn't with me, but yeah, that definitely sounds like something.
I've heard someone tell me that before. I'm like, oh, that's so.
Just setting everybody up for success, right? Yeah. Absolutely, just messing with each other's.
Oh, why are we running behind schedule?
Guys pulling out stands, over wrenching stuff. So, with that being said, like, what kind of makes a really tough day for you when you show up at set? What just is like, oh, I just cannot believe that this is what we have to do today?
I think it's when we have a lot of location moves in one day where I'm like, because
why is that bad? Why is there a lot of location moves?
Why is it tough? Well, because you have to. the
Even right now, just
I'm
watching
like,
you, just thinking about it.
it's tough because, top of the day, you have to, the first location, you unload the truck, you unload all your carts, all your frames, everything. And then you're already anticipating that by the time we finish this scene and move on to the next location, we have to do this process all over again. Whereas when you're in one location for the whole day, you don't really have to. You just think at pre-call and at wrap, those are things that you have to do. It's inevitable. Every day you'll do it. But that's fine because it's the beginning of the day, it's the end of the day. But when you have like 3+ location moves, you're like, we got to do this thing that we normally only do twice a day at the beginning and end, 6 times now. So it's just like, and it depends because actually in IA it's not that bad because they just have so much manpower. Like I've never seen that before.
It is.
It's actually impressive, and it makes life so much easier because you're like, oh, I don't have to do as much heavy lifting because we're all gonna like spread the weight distribution evenly. Like everyone's gonna roll over. Like it's crazy. You have one person for every cart to roll over, so it takes like a quarter of the amount of time.
Way more efficient.
It's so much more efficient, and it's easier on your back, and it's great. But in Maybet, I remember like, oh my God, 3 location moves, and we have 4 guys, and I'm like, we're gonna have to, like, each person has to roll like 2 carts at least, and all the sandbag carts, and it's just you're just like so tired. And if it's in the summer too, you're just sweating, and you're just, or if it's in the winter, your face is just getting like wet from sweat, but then freezing from the cold, so you're just like uncomfortable. But I think that's one of the worst things.
And so, where do you want to take your career in the grip department? Like, it sounds like you've done some seconding, you've done some gripping.
Mm-hmm.
Are you wanting to be a key, or you wanting to be a dolly grip? Like, where are you kind of trying to push your career next?
I've done some key gripping, and to be honest, I like besting more. And I think it's because I eventually see myself producing. I really like the logistics of planning things and having those conversations with people in prep and problem solving. I think that's what I love doing personally. And I think being a production manager or a producer is like being a best, but for every department. And I think that's what I want to do.
So then, like, what do you love about the film industry in general, then, or even like, what do you enjoy about your job as a grip the most?
I really love meeting new people each time I work on a film set. I think there's always new people to meet, and you're often, even though it's funny because I say it's a small world but a big world, because it's a small world because you always at least know one other person on set that you've worked with before. At least in my case, I've had that happen where I'm like, oh, hey, I haven't seen you since that commercial we did like 2 years ago or whatever. And you're like, yeah, how are you? And it's great. It's like a little reunion. And then, everyone else on the film crew, maybe you've never met before, and you get to meet all these new, interesting people. And I think that's great. And your job is never the same. You're never going to the same office every day or working on the same thing.
I couldn't agree more. So when we get together, as you were just saying, when we're talking to our friends and stuff like that we haven't seen in a while, there's always stories we like to share with those people. Is there a story that you are able to share with us today, either a crazy adventure that you went on in the film industry, or just something fun or exciting that you've seen, or just, oh wow, I can't believe I did that?
Yeah, I feel like every time I share a crazy story about my experience in the film industry, it's always this one movie. It's always this movie that I did like 3 years ago, and it was super early in my career in gripping, and everything was just crazy. Like the director was ambitious, the cinematographer was trying to keep up with these ambitions, and then there's me and my key grip, and me kind of whispering to my key grip like, hey, what are we doing? I don't know what this is. And so there was like a lot of it was like jumping into the fire because it was a huge learning curve, and I had to learn by trial by fire. So just throwing me into the deep end, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna learn how to swim now. So there was this one. So on this movie, we were on the tech survey, and we're at this ravine in Scarborough, and the director is saying like, okay, the tracking shot is going to be on the dolly here. The actors are going to walk towards us, and then on the Fisher 23, we're going to jib up to the bridge that's overhead here, and I'm trying to take all these notes, and I'm like, okay, got it, Fisher 23. Okay, I'm like, what is that? And Mikey's like, shh, like, don't expose yourself. We'll get there. Don't worry. Okay. And so, we're taking photos and measurements of the location to prep ourselves for with the gear and whether we need dailies that day. And so 2 weeks later, we get back to this location where we're actually going to shoot there, and a flash flood happened. So the location where we were going to lay all this dolly track was now flooded with water, and this amazing shot that the director envisioned was no longer going to be in this direction. It had to shift over here where there was still land to lay track on. And we actually had to, so the entrance to this ravine was now on a slope like this. And so it was like almost a 90-degree slope just to get into the ravine. So we're thinking, okay, we have to somehow get the dolly in here. And it's muddy, it's no longer like nice patches of grass. And we're like, okay, we need to do this safely, but we don't have a lot of time to do this safely. Like, think, what are we gonna do? And Mikey, being brilliant, he was like, okay, we're gonna take these stakes, we're gonna hammer them into the ground with a sledgehammer, and then we're gonna attach pulleys to the stakes, and then we're gonna rope down the dolly. We're gonna have 2 people on the back and 2 people in the front, one feeding the rope, one controlling the feet of the rope, and that's how we're gonna do it. And we're
So
like,
cool.
yeah, I was like, this is crazy, and I've never been in a situation like this before. And I'm like, okay, I guess we're doing it. And so we got the dolly in there, and we laid the track, and the shot looked amazing.
So we hear a lot of time when we're talking about laying track down, we need to order cribbing. What is that?
So cribbing is basically anything that you're going to use to level the track. A lot of the times we're laying dolly track on unleveled concrete, in mud, on pebble, cobblestone, anything you name it. You just have to be prepared to be able to level the track on any kind of surface. So cribbing is anything from wedges, pads, full and half. Sometimes we use basso blocks, apple boxes of different sizes. So yeah, that's cribbing.
And that like that's just a perfect example of like experience pays.
Yeah,
Right? Like that's
yeah.
so what you're paying for, right? Is for
Yeah.
a lot of that experience that you or some of the other people have in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
So that's so cool. Well, thank you so very much for joining us. Thank
Thanks
you
for
as well for
having me.
watching. Big shout out to today's sponsor, Make the Films here in Toronto, for all your studio grip, camera, and lighting needs. Make sure to check them out for your next project. Now, I'm your host, Tony Smith. Thank you very much for watching. If you've gained anything, enjoy this, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Until next time, film on.